Okay, so this is, I believe, the sixth video lecture, and this one I want to talk. I'm going to talk specifically about some of the major classes of psychoactive drugs. So the first group we're going to talk about is depressants, and the most common kind of depressant is obviously alcohol. This image you have here is serving sizes of different kinds of alcohol. So if you, what is the word? I always forget. Oh my God, proof. That's what it is. So all alcohol should have some marker on it as to the percentage of alcohol that's actually in it. So what this image is the same amount of alcohol illustrated by the different kinds of drinks. So beer, traditionally, but some beer has pretty high alcohol content, and not all alcohol content is the same in beer. Used to be if a beer was sold in a grocery store or a gas station, it had a lower 3.2, I think is what it was. It had a lower alcohol content than if it was sold in a liquor store. So not the same amount of alcohol per beer. Not all beer is the same kind of thing. Well, yeah. Then you have malt liquor. So this would be things like, what is this one right here? This would be things like whiskey, I think scotch falls into this category. No. Malt liquor is different. Yeah, I have got myself confused. And then you have wine, which is typically a fermented fruit, but then there's dandelion wine, and then there's elderberry wine, and it typically has a little bit more. And then you have, there it is. Then you have whiskey, gin, rum, and vodka, which are all have to do with the kind of container it's fermented in, has to do with the kind of grain it's fermented from. And in some cases, like I think scotch, the water has to come from Scotland. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. My downfall has always been wine. That's the kind of drinking that I have done. I do. Okay, anyway. So some things to consider with your alcohol consumption. A standard rule about metabolism is 1 serving per hour. Typically, we can some people metabolize faster, some people metabolize slower, but that's a good rule of thumb. So that would mean if you're trying to stay sober or under a legal limit, that would be like 1 beer an hour, 1 glass of wine an hour. But the rate at which you metabolize has something to do with what's in your stomach, how much water you consume, how much body fat you have. So if you were to drink on an empty stomach, you're going to absorb that alcohol much faster. You can't really prevent yourself from absorbing alcohol because your body has to metabolize it, but you can slow it down by it being metabolized through, in conjunction with or alongside that bready meal. And if I remember right, you don't want to eat bread and beer because beer is based on a grain. And anyway, so there's all kinds of wives' tales. Uh, Alcohol slows down, right? Primarily, it slows down the frontal lobe. It might be a quiz question. It used to be a quiz question, like, why do you do dumb things when you've been drinking alcohol? It's because this frontal lobe has quieted. Like, under normal conditions, you would not have danced on the table. You would not have made out with that boy. But because the part of your brain that says, don't do that, is not engaged. This is also one of the reasons that a lot of alcoholics are like, I cannot even have one drink, because one drink causes the frontal lobe to slow down or disengage, which then means you're going to make another bad decision and you're more likely to drink again. So as long as you keep, all of your wherewithal, all your wits together. Sometimes drunks will lose their balance, and that's because not only does it slow down the frontal lobe, but it also slows down the cerebellum. And you may remember that the cerebellum is the part of the brain implicated in balance and breathing. So you lose your ability to walk straight. Blackouts are often caused by becoming so drunk that the parts of your brain that process memories have slowed down to the point that they don't form memories anymore. So that's kind of what a blackout is. So when you think about people acting badly when they're drunk, it's because their judgment is impaired because it affects your frontal lobe. This might be a quiz question. Your frontal lobe and your cerebellum. Yeah, I think it might be a quiz question, like, why do you do dumb things? This is just a chart I found that I thought might be of interest, and it compares blood alcohol content after 1 hour by body weight. So you have body weight across the top here. So like a woman who weighs 140 pounds, if she's had 2 drinks, her blood alcohol content would be 0.5. And then I think this line is supposed to indicate like what the legal limit is. But here's a trick question. What is the legal limit for a 20-year-old in the state of Kansas? The answer is 0. There is no legal limit. For a 20-year-old can blow nothing. They can have 0 alcohol legally in the state of Kansas. Nope, that's my sociology class. In my sociology class, I show a video about binge drinking. And the argument is that in especially towns like I live in Manhattan, which is a college town, and in towns like that, there'll be these big house parties, and you'll have all these people underage, and people will get really, really drunk, and they won't call the police, right? And there's a story about a kid out of Colorado who died. He died because he drank too much, and he was in a fraternity where and the kid was under 21, so they didn't call for help because they didn't want to get in trouble. And the kid died because they were too afraid of the consequences for them. In the state of Kansas, I believe we have passed something that I think they call it like a Good Samaritan law. That may not be exactly what they call it. But in the state of Kansas, if you or your friend is impaired and you go to the hospital for help, you are not supposed to get in trouble for being underage, because you are acting in the best interest, like you're trying to get this person help, and you shouldn't get in trouble for that. Yeah. But anyway, so the question I ask my sociology students to consider is, when they raised the drinking age in the 1980s from 18 to 21, and it reduced the number of traffic fatalities, but it also drove underage drinking, what they call underground. So people started drinking in house parties instead of publicly. And the question is, maybe we should lower the drinking age back to 18. I mean, after all, you can vote, you can join the military. I think in some places you can like buy a rifle. Why shouldn't you also be able to have a beer, is the argument. This slide here is, I don't actually know if it's up to date, if it's still current. I should have checked before I put it in here, but it's basically to give you some sense of the consequences of a DUI in the state of Kansas. First offense, first offense, when do you lose your driver's license? You lose it for 30 days here, a year, all along. Don't drink and drive, it's very dangerous. Another kind of depressants are barbiturates. I think there's a question. So all of these have some sort of barbiturate element to them. They all slow down brain activity. The difference between the shapes and the colors has to do with what am I talking about? Milligrams, right? How much milligrams? So some common barbiturates that you may or may not have heard of. I'm trying to read it here. You have Valium. These are all Valiums up here. What's another common one? Xanax. So Xanax is a barbiturate. It is also a depressant. It slows down brain activity. I can't read all of them on here. Restorol. I'm probably saying that all wrong. But all of these are different kinds, and they vary by color and shape. That has to do with the milligrams. Some of the other Xanax, Valium, some of the street names, roofies, barbiturates, Quaaludes, Ativan. I'm not even going to try. Anyway, I should know how to say all those, and I probably did at one point. A really common one that it's probably 10 years ago or so, there was a big story about Bill Cosby. And Bill Cosby was famous for giving young women Quaaludes, and Quaaludes are currently illegal in the United States, but they were real popular in the 70s. They were considered one of the first date rape drugs, and originally manufactured to fight malaria, but they had a very long half-life. And what that meant was, after digesting a Quaalude, they would remain in your system for up to like half-life until they were halfway gone, 20 hours, so 2 days, right? You could still have the presence of quaaludes, they used to call them. There's some classic movies anyway. They were a party drug kind of thing. And what quaaludes do is, going back to chapter 2 when we were talking about common neurotransmitters, is they increase the availability of GABA. And you remember GABA is, this is where it gets it's kind of not paradoxical, but counterintuitive, because as GABA increases, that slows down brain activity. GABA is like putting the brakes. So what the quaaludes do is they put on the brakes, because GABA, if you think about GABA as a big brake and you make the big brakes bigger, it slows things down. As a common depressant. Sometimes I like to ask, or I like to think about, or ask students to think about, like, which kind of drug, like which sounds most appealing to you, a depressant or a stimulant or a psychedelic. But let me finish talking about some of those other drugs here in just a second. Okay, so I'm going to stop here and come back and talk about